They buried me before I was even cold. That's the thought that cut through my chest when I saw the sympathy bouquet leaning against my own front door. The white lilies sagged in the Boston wind, petals bruised by November's chill, and the card tucked into the plastic sleeve carried just two characters. A letter, a dash, nothing else. I wasn't set dead. I was standing across the street, alive, watching my wife cradle a toddler inside the house we built together. She bent low, pressed her lips to his hair, and whispered, "It sets okay, baby." The boy's sneaker, a tiny red Converse, was kicked off in the hallway like it belonged there. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The florist had charged her $2,800. I know that because I picked the crumpled invoice out of the recycling bin later that night. December 12th, it said, Turner Memorial Service. Paid in full. I ran my thumb over the receipt until the ink smudged, until I wasn't sure if it was sweat or tears staining it. It wasn't just betrayal of marriage anymore. Leah wasn't sneaking around to cover her tracks. She was building a funeral for me while I was still breathing. That Friday, November 18th, Boston's Back Bay smelled like salt and wet stone. I walked past South Station, collar turned up, trying to steady myself. Inside my pocket was the bank app screen glowing back at me. $28,450 in cash withdrawals I didn't approve. The kind of number you don't misplace. When I called the bank, the woman on the line spoke too softly, like she was already at my wake. "Yes, sir, those were cash withdrawals linked to the joint account." November 2nd, November 8th, November 15th. Leah had drained nearly 30 grand while telling neighbors I'd collapsed on a job site. At home, my Ring doorbell had caught her voice. That same evening, around 7:20 p.m., she told the boy, her boy, "Daddy Sep's gone, but I sept him here. Not my son, not my blood." Her secret child with Dr. Marcus Hale, the ER physician she swore was just a colleague. The sting wasn't only that she'd lied about him. It was that she had the audacity to comfort him in my house, surrounded by the millwork I'd crafted with my own hands. Every beam, every cabinet, every walnut joint, it all carried my fingerprints, and she thought she could erase me with a death certificate. When I was 18, back in 1987, I lost my father to a heart attack. No will, no trust. The state took our house faster than we could grieve. I swore then I'd never let paper steal what love had built. That night, as I stood under the sodium street lamp across from my house, the echo of that gavel came back to me. I felt 18 again, powerless, a son watching the system strip away a legacy, but I wasn't a boy anymore. I had receipts. I had a prenup addendum from 2016. I had a trust binder from July 2022. I had proof. Leah thought she could bury me. What she didn't know was that ghosts still walk. I didn't knock. I didn't storm in. Instead, I walked away. I chose silence. For now. I checked into the workshop I owned in Dorchester, laid down on a cot between sawdust and varnish. The smell of oak steadied me. My sister Nora, a CPA with a spine of steel, always said, "You don't fight fire with fire, you fight it with ledgers." But before ledgers there was rage. The next morning, November 19th, the Boston Globe ran an article about early snow flurries. I bought a copy, circled the date, and slid it into the same drawer as the florist's invoice. That's how my mind worked now. Every scrap, every time stamp, tucked into a binder I labeled "Still Alive." I knew Leah would stage something bigger soon. She had to. She couldn't claim my pension, the house, the business, without pushing paper through the courts. That meant affidavits, notaries, probate, petitions. Every move she made left a paper trail, and I intended to follow it until it strangled her. That Sunday, I walked the neighborhood pretending to be a stranger in my own life. I saw Mr. Whitcomb, my neighbor, carrying groceries. He nodded politely, not recognizing me under the cap and scruff. Later, he'd become a witness, vouching for when mail arrived and who signed for what. But at that moment, it hurt, being invisible on the street where I'd spent decades. Through the bay window, Leah set a framed photo of me on the mantel. Not the wedding picture, not one of me holding our nieces. No, she picked the shot of me alone at the shop, sawdust on my shirt as if I'd already been embalmed in my craft. She was rehearsing my funeral. That night, the boy's laughter rang out across the street. High, innocent, unaware of the lies wrapped around his little shoulders. I didn't hate him. He didn't choose this. But every sound of his joy carved deeper into my ribs, because it was built on my erasure. I wrote in my notebook, "Protect what you build, even if you have to do it from the grave." On November 21st, I found the hotel folio in Leah's glove compartment. Nov 19th to 21st, the Park Plaza. Signed with her maiden name, paid with our joint card. $1,145 for 3 nights. That was the weekend she'd told friends she was arranging funeral logistics. Instead, she was with Marcus. I photographed every page. Timestamp glowing 3:42 p.m., and slipped the photos into the binder. Another nail in the coffin she was building, not mine, but hers. The last straw came 2 days before Thanksgiving. A notary gap appeared. Kendra, the local notary, had logged affidavits for November 23rd, but Leah's name was missing. No ID checked, no entry. Yet a document surfaced at the courthouse with her signature notarized. That gap would become the wedge that cracked her scheme open. I stood in my workshop, phone buzzing in my palm, Nora Sepp's voice crisp in my ear. "Mike, if you want to burn her, you let her light the match first. Don't Sepp stop her. Track her." I closed my binder, the edges swollen with receipts, invoices, screenshots. She thought I was dead. She thought she had time. But I wasn't sit dead. I was watching. And soon I said, "Make her watch me rise." South Station swallowed me whole. Saturday foot traffic bled into the marble like static, and the departures board ticked out destinations I couldn't feel. Providence, New Haven, New York. Every line a door I didn't have the will to walk through. I sat on a cold bench at 12:13 p.m., the kind that keeps you honest, the kind that makes your back remember you're alive. I pressed my palms together and tried to breathe, but the smell of coffee and brake dust kept turning to lilies. On my phone, the bank app glared back. $28,450 in cash withdrawals. November 2nd, $9,000. November 8th, $9,000. November 15th, $10,450. Each line item was a punch, a rhythm of theft. Leah turned our marriage into a cash machine, and my name into a pin. There's a sound that a grown man makes when the floor under him gives way. It isn't loud. It's a quiet, stunned exhale, as if he's trying not to embarrass himself by breaking. That sound slipped out of me while a kid tugged his mother's coat and pointed at the schedule. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste iron. I'd rather bleed into myself than cry in public. I opened the voice memo app and said, "November 19th, South Station, 12:15. I am not dead." My voice sounded like a stranger's, flat, professional, like a contractor reading specs. I saved the file into a folder named Still Alive. Evidence had to be more than paper, it had to be me. A vibration in my pocket, a ring notification from home. I hit play. Through the tinny speaker came Leah's voice, low and syrup slow. "Shh, it's okay, baby." Then the boy's hiccuping breaths. A plastic toy clattered on hardwood. My hardwood and a soft thump as if a small body leaned against the door. I could picture it, his palm pressed to the wood, the way kids test the world. I didn't hate him. God help me. I wanted him far away from this. I looked down at my hands. Scar along the thumb from a chisel in 03, a burn dot on the wrist from a finishing gun in 11. My body was a ledger of honest work, and yet, on paper, I was vanishing. A memory arrived without permission. 1987. Nora and I on the porch steps. August heat, the kind that makes shirts cling. The probate clerk's letter had come in a windowed envelope, and the grown-ups spoke in the language of loss, intestate, lien, claims. I remember the sound of the gavel later, how it didn't sound like wood on wood, it sounded like doors shutting down a hallway. You can't run fast enough to reach. The state didn't care that we'd eaten grilled cheese on that stoop. It cared that no one had inked a plan. I promised then, "Protect what you build." It became a creed that fit in a pocket. It turned into a prenup addendum in May 2016, a trust binder in July 2022. But a creed is quiet. Grief is loud. By 1:05 p.m., I was outside on the curb. November wind knifed through my jacket, and a bus sighed like a tired animal. I dialed Nora. She picked up on the second ring. "Say it," she said. She drained the account. 28,450. And there Seps a kid, Nor. He calls her Sat Mama. Seps. Silence. Then, okay, that Seps the bottom. We build from there. I bis him at South Station. I as Purim at my desk. Send me screenshots. All of them. We document the fall so the rise has teeth. I sent her the bank screen, the florist invoice, the hotel folio I'd found in Leah's glove compartment. The Park Plaza logo looked smug, the way expensive paper does. Nora's typing dots pulsed. "This is what we do," she wrote. "You collapse into my inbox. Then you stand up." I tried to stand up right there, but couldn't. My knees buzzed with a low electric treason. I ducked into the men's room, locked myself in a stall, and pressed my forehead to the cool metal partition. The graffiti at eye level said J plus K forever in ballpoint. I laughed, one harsh bark, and it echoed back too loud. 5 minutes. That's what I allowed. I set a timer. When it chimed, I rinsed my face at the sink and watched the water run clear. No tears. Not because I'm a hero, because there was nothing left in me that would help. Outside, I called Addie Glass and got voicemail. "It's Mike Turner. Hypothetical spouse files probate while the alleged decedent is breathing. I have trust docs dated July 14th, 22, prenup addendum, December 16th, 05. There's also a notary irregularity. Call me." I hung up and texted Val Santos, a PI I'd hired for a union client years back. "Need a discrete timeline built, Leah Turner." Dr. Marcus Hale, November 1st, December 15th. Vendors, hotel, notary, attorney Caldwell, cash movements. Then I walked. Tremont to Park, Park to Beacon. Beacon to a bench by the bronze ducklings frozen mid-waddle. Tourists posed with them. I sat and tried not to count days like rosary beads. 22 until the memorial on December 12th. Probably a probate petition before that. She'd need it to move the pension and house. Probate court opens Montfree, filings stamped in the morning. She would file early the way she organizes a med cart. Right, precise, deadly. A woman nearby fed crumbs to real ducks who didn't know they were being patronized. I watched their soft throats swallow and thought about the boy's throat when he cried. Collapse is strange. It makes you empathetic and merciless at the same time. I felt for the child and wanted the adults who'd trapped him in deceit to learn new meanings of consequence. My shop in Dorchester became the only place where breathing made sense. I got there at 3:40 p.m., turned the deadbolt, and stood listening to the quiet as textures. In a woodshop it is felt, the dust settling, the string of a pole chain swaying gently, the way light through the high windows cuts the air into boards of brightness. I made tea on a hot plate, sat at the drafting table, and opened the still-alive binder. I printed the bank screen and taped it under a tab called Drains. I slid the florist invoice into Memorial, and annotated each with a pen. Pulled by Leah? Watch teller footage? Note $2,800. Why over by? Venue tie? I wrote the questions in red to argue with myself later. At 5:06 p.m., my phone lit up. A new voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I hit play. "Mr. Turner, this is attorney Raymond Caldwell, Leah's pick, calling to express condolences and to schedule a brief meeting regarding preliminary paperwork for the estate. Please have a representative contact our office Monday, 9 a.m. sharp." The casual theft in his tone made my molars grind. I forwarded to Nora and Glass. Nora replied first, "Good. He's eager, men leave footprints." Glass texted a minute later, "Do not engage. We will file a threshold affidavit the moment probate opens." The word threshold steadied me. It meant there was a door, and doors could be controlled, opened, closed, braced. Then the crash came. Not loud, just sudden, like a shelf giving way inside my chest. I laid my head on my forearms and let the weight have me. I thought about the last time Leah looked at me like I was a man, not a solution. Maybe 2 summers ago at Revere Beach, when we shared a paper boat of fries and she stole the crispiest ones and called it tax. Or the time the furnace died in February and I rigged a space heater labyrinth so the pipes wouldn't freeze, and she whispered, "I always feel safe when you're thinking." Now she'd thought me into the ground. Grief makes lists. I listed losses on a yellow pad: house, company, pension, name. Then I added one more: dignity. I crossed that out. Dignity is not a possession. It's a practice. You can't steal mine. You can only tempt me to drop it. At 7:12 p.m., Nora called again. I ran preliminary polls. Caldwell Sip's filing patterns are morning heavy. He likes the stamp that proves he sips punctual. Expect December 4th or sooner. I sips sending you an intake spreadsheet. You sips fill it. Eat something first. I is been not hungry. Eat humiliation if you must, but chew it while working. Mike, listen to me. The collapse is part of the climb. You spiral now, so you one set later. Let it finish. How do I know when it set's finished? You still start thinking in verbs again. After we hung up, I microwaved leftover lo mein I'd forgotten I had at the shop. I ate it cold after the first rubbery bite. Then I filled Nora's spreadsheet: dates, amounts, locations, names. Marcus Hale. Under affiliates, Kendra Notary. Under irregularities, with a note: journal gap, November 23rd. Under witnesses, I typed Mr. Whitcomb. Mail recollection. At 9:03 p.m., I opened the trust binder: Turner Family Trust. Executed July 14th, 22. Signature neat, notarized properly. My name in identically square letters, as always. I ran a finger under the clause that mattered. Primary residence held separate, spouse's elective share waived pursuant to prenup addendum. December 16th, 05. The paper felt like a plank in a flood. I closed everything and stared at the ceiling until the shop lights dimmed on their timer at 10 p.m. In that darkness I heard 1987 again. The gavel, the doors. But I also heard something else. The tenor of my own breath smoothing out into a decision. I picked up the pen and wrote in block letters across a fresh page: I will resurrect myself in court. Under it, a plan formed like joinery sketch lines. Stay dead publicly. Track moves. Document every dollar, every call. Let Leah file. Glass interrupts. ID ready. Evidence loaded. I circled ID and jotted license expires 2026. I underlined ring audio and Caldwell voicemail and bank drains, and finally, boy not to blame. I needed that last line where I could see it. Justice collapses into vengeance if you forget who's innocent. By midnight, the collapse had done its work. I was hollowed, yes, but hollows make space. And in that space, resolve fit cleanly, like a hand into a glove. I set an alarm for 6:15 a.m., laid on the shop cot, and closed my eyes. The last thing I pictured was the courtroom door on December 10th. Heavy oak, brass handle polished by 1,000 desperate palms. When it opened, I would walk through it breathing. I whispered into the dark to the boy across the street who would never hear it. You said I'll have the truth one day, kid. I said I'll make sure the grown-ups leave a record you can trust. Then to myself, stand up, Mike. I slept. The difference between drowning and swimming is paperwork. On Monday, November 21st, I woke to the shop space heater clicking on and the smell of oak dust in my mouth. I boiled water on the hot plate and opened Nora's spreadsheet. Rows weighted like empty ribs. I started feeding them muscle. 8:12 a.m. I entered the bank drains under a tab called Cash Flow Anomalies. November 2nd, $9,000. November 8th, $9,000. November 15th, $10,450. I flagged each with joint withdrawal, verify teller footage. In vendors, I placed the florist Rose and Rafter, $2,800, 12/12, Turner Memorial Service. I added a question column because Nora likes questions more than answers. Venue relationship? Deposit terms? Refund policy if decedent appears? By 9:05 a.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Val Santos. Val on it. Building Lanes. Leah Markin, Caldwell Notary. Please confirm Leah Sips car plate. Me, May 7KZL41, Gray Subaru Outback. Park Plaza Folio 9 21 attached. I sent the photos and he replied with a thumbs up and a hawk emoji. Val is not poetic, but he is relentless. At 9:20, I called Addy Glass. He answered on the second ring, voice sandpapered by early mornings and low expectations. I is done breathing. I prefer my clients that way. I expect Caldwell to file probate December 4th or sooner. I have a 2022 trust and a 2016 addendum. Good. We draft a status affidavit stating the obvious. You start not dead, trust exists, assets are held. We shall attach an ID copy. We one set file it until we see Caldwell Sepp's petition hit the docket. We want the judge to feel interrupted. The interrupted Sefte. Threshold issues are best when they stop a train. I still have language to you by tonight. In the meantime, you set your rumor. When the call ended, I stared at the still alive binder as if it were a living thing. It was binders breathe when you feed them. I walked to the front door of the shop and checked the lock. Schlide deadbolt, rekeyed 2020, because I don't like being surprised. I scribbled a note, house locks? Leah would rekey ours to keep the performance tight. Proof of that would go to motive and preparation. Val texted again. Val rekey invoice found beacon lock and key dated 11/17 service at your home address. $265. Tech name Roman notes stay customer Leah requested rush steps. I sat down. It was the little professional details that hurt. She'd planned my absence the way a nurse plans a shift, checklists, handoffs, signatures. At 10:31 a.m., I took a slow walk up Dorchester Ave, cutting through a side street lined with triple-deckers wearing peeling paint like scabs. I needed air and a signal. I called Mr. Whitcomb, my neighbor, a retired school custodian who logs his days with the devotion of a monk. Whitcomb, he answered, wary and old school. Mr. Whitcomb, it's Seps Mike Turner. Pause. Then a cane tap, his tell when he Seps surprised. I need a favor. Two, actually. First, keep this call between us. Second, I need your memory. Mail arrivals, packages, anything Leah signs for between now and December 12th. I fin not one to pry, son. You should be a witness, not to gossip, to clocks. If a process server comes, if a certified letter lands, time, date, who opened the door. He cleared his throat. I do keep a little ledger for my blood pressure meds mail reminders. I can jot notes when I see the truck. That will matter. I hated myself for the heat in my voice. Men who've lost homes become evangelists for timestamps. By noon, Nora had turned my skeleton entries into a living file. She sent a link. I opened it and watched formulas crawl in the cells like ants. Tabs multiplied. Financial drains, vendors, legal, irregularities, witnesses, timeline. She'd color-coded categories: red for confirmed, amber for suspected, green for exculpatory. Under irregularities, she entered Notary Kendra. Journal gap around 11/23 with a yellow tag. Beneath it, she added, Caldwell Bar complaints, historical, with a gray dot waiting to turn red. She called me at 12:15 p.m. Breathe and listen. We build a timeline with independent anchors. Your binder tells a story. Our spreadsheet proves it. What are the anchors? Receipts, logs, footage, stamps, third-party things that don't sit care about anyone Sip's feelings. Is Palm requesting Kendra Sip's public notary journal entries surrounding November 23rd. If there's Sip's a gap, we still know if Leah forged a notarization or if Kendra got sloppy. Both help us. Why does a missing entry help? Because the court believes systems. A system with a hole is a louder witness than a person with tears. At 1:03, Val sent a photo of Leah outside the hospital. Night shift hair, scrub jacket, phone lit against her cheek. The caption read, Call to Marcus logged 11/20, 10:54 p.m. Duration 18. M pulling his clinic schedule to test overlap. He followed with a screenshot of Marcus Hale's public-facing lecture listing at the hospital. Ethics in Emergency Care, 11/21, 7 p.m. Val, I texted, do not escalate. I need facts, not fireworks. Fail, facts only. Fireworks come with permits. I smirked despite myself. By 2:40, Glass emailed a draft of the status affidavit. It read like a heartbeat. I, Michael Turner, being of sound mind and body, declare that I am alive. Then the bones, license number, address, trust reference, Turner Family Trust, executed July 14th, 22, prenup addendum, December 16th, 05. A statement that I had neither consented to nor authorized any probate filing. He added a final sentence that tasted like steel. I am prepared to appear in person to resolve this threshold matter. I printed it but did not sign. Not yet. I slid it behind the plastic sleeve labeled Court December and traced the outline of the page with a finger, the way you might trace a doorway before walking through. At 4:10, I drove the shop van to my street in Boston and parked 2 houses down. From that angle, I could see the front steps and the new gleam on the lock. Beacon lock and key had done clean work. Leah opened the door with the boy at her hip, his hand clutching her collar. A delivery guy in a black jacket handed her a flat envelope. She signed on a digital pad. Mr. Whitcomb, across the way, pretended to adjust his porch light while watching the exchange. Good man. At 5:02, my phone lit Nora again. Kendra's notary journal is public for entries, but the detailed logs require a request. I have the public part. Listen, November 22, entry 114, refinance doc, Mr. Jenkins. Entry 115, power of attorney, Miss Lee. Entry 116, missing. Entry 117, DMV form. There's a hole right where Leah's affidavit timestamp would likely land. How likely? Very. Caldwell likes Wed's Thurs affidavits to tee up Monday filings. That puts Leah at Kendra Sip's desk around Wed, November 23rd. The hole is proof of either sloppiness or manipulation. If it's suppiness, Caldwell argues clerical error, and we argue pattern. If it sets manipulation, we argue fraud. Either way, the judge pauses. A pause is oxygen. I put the phone on speaker, set it next to the still-alive binder, and drew a diagram with a carpenter's pencil. Leas Caldwell, Kendra probate clerk. In the corner I wrote Whitcomb Mail Anchor and Val Hotel and Reiki Anchors. I boxed $28,450 cash withdrawals and drew arrows to florist $2,800 and hotel $1,145. Money likes to find its own kind. Follow it and it tells you who it loves. At 6:30, I microwaved a burrito and ate it standing up, eyes on the board. Somewhere in the city, Leah buckled the boy into pajamas and told him a story that required a dead man to stay dead. These are bedtime stories for adults. 7:14 p.m. Full vendor call capture. Leah told venue managers, said my son needs closure. Seth paid $1,500 balance today. Recording saved. I wrote son in quotation marks. The word wasn't a lie to the boy, but it was a blade to me. I underlined $1,500 and added venue verify memorial program printer. Programs have vendors. Vendors have invoices. Invoices have dates. Dates have gavel weight. By 8:50 I pulled into a dim lot behind a Dunkin' Sip and called Glass again. If Caldwell files December 4th at 9:17 a.m., what time do we walk in? He didn't just hesitate. 9:18. We wait in the hallway. The second his petition stamp hits, we interrupt. Judges don't sit like ghosts. They like IDs. I pictured the brass handle of the courtroom door again, the smudge pattern of 1,000 desperate mornings. Bring yourself. Binders persuade. Breath convinces. When the call ended, I sat a while watching a train slip across the dark like a zipper. Planning is not revenge. Planning is carpentry. You cut twice in your mind, so you only cut once in the world. I drove back to the shop and laid the binder on the cot as if it might need sleep too. Before lights out, I played the ring clip of Leah's whisper again. It's okay, baby. Then I played Caldwell's voicemail. Please have a representative contact our office Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. I wanted the 2 sounds braided, the cradle and the con. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Missing notary entry W. Deej." Then below it, wedge pause. Pause questions, questions truth. I clicked the lamp off and stared into the shop's soft darkness. The smell of walnut was a lullaby older than any vow. Somewhere out there, Leah's narrative gathered steam, the funeral engines warming. In here, the counter-story sharpened, quiet, lawful, heavier. I slept to the rhythm of my own plan, hearing not a gavel but the tick of a clock moving toward December 10th, when the door would open and the room would learn I was still here. The week of Thanksgiving carried a strange double life. Boston streets glittered with early holiday lights, wreaths slapped onto brownstones, neighbors hauling turkeys from car trunks. Inside my shop, revenge was being planed smooth and squared true like timber under a steady hand. On Thursday, November 24th, I started my morning with sawdust in the lungs and Nora Sipp's voice on speaker. "We Sepp got the notary wedge. Kendra Sepp's journal skips right where Leah Sepp's affidavit should be. That Sepp's not just sloppy. That Sepp's leverage." I wrote the word budgie in bold letters across the whiteboard I'd set up by my cot. Under it, I taped the notary log printout. The missing slot circled in red. One absence, one silence. It could pry open the entire scheme. That afternoon, Val texted me from his surveillance run. Filbo Leah visited Beacon Lock again. Picked up extra keys, told Tech she needed them for Cinch funeral arrangements. He followed with a picture. Leah standing under the shop's awning, eyes down, toddler balanced on her hip. The child's tiny hand clutched the brass key like treasure. I studied that photo for a long time. I didn't hate the boy. My anger braided itself around the adults, their arrogance in using innocence as camouflage. I pinned the photo under the heading "Stake, Blood Deep." Leah was measuring. On Saturday, November 26th, Val caught her in the living room with a tape measure stretched across the mantel. He recorded her saying, "This is where the portrait will go, my portrait. The one she'd framed from my workshop days." She stood there calmly, blue tape marking corners. The boy playing with blocks at her feet. The image burned. She was designing my funeral like a home project. Center the photo. Anchor with lilies. Seat the guests. That night, I pulled an old walnut beam from storage and clamped it to the bench. I chiseled not for sale, not for order, but for sanity. Each curl of wood was a breath I couldn't otherwise take. I told myself, she thinks she's planning closure. What she's really doing is staging evidence. On Sunday, November 27th, Nora came by the shop. She carried binders of her own, CPA neat green tabs slicing order from chaos. She spread them on the workbench. "This is your lifeline," she said. Trust execution July 14th, 2022. Prenup addendum May 12th, 2016. Payroll ledgers balanced through October. Every sheet reconciles. She tapped the corner of the prenup. "This is the clause that saves you. Elective share waived. Leah can touch the house, not legally. Her entire scam hinges on the judge believing you sets are not alive to assert it." I exhaled slow. So all I have to do is breathe. She gave me that look only sisters can, equal parts stern and soft. You breathe, but you also prepare. Collapse was last act. Now you sharpen. Monday, November 28th. A courier envelope arrived at Leah Sipps's addressed to estate of Michael Turner. Mr. Whitcomb noted the delivery time in his little ledger, 10:14 a.m. He texted me, big envelope, cream color, legal return address. She signed L. Turner. I added it under mail anchors in the binder. Leah thought paperwork buried men. She'd forgotten men could read. That evening, Glass called. "Mike, listen carefully. Probate runs on silence and assumption. Leah Sipp's silence about your breathing lets her assumption stand. We keep you out of sight until Caldwell files. Then impact." I said never been much good at hiding. You stir not hiding, you stir staging. Big difference, think of it as carpentry. You don't nail the board until it sets us as line true. His words echoed in the rafters as I sanded the walnut mantel. Staging, every act had to look casual until the reveal. On November 30th, Val emailed a PDF, Leah Sepp's recorded call with a memorial vendor. Her voice was honey to strangers. Yes, the service is December 12th. Yes, it will be at St. Mary Seps Hall. My son needs closure. My husband passed suddenly. That last word, passed, made me grip the bench edge until my knuckles popped. Passed where? Into sawdust and silence? Into paperwork? Passed like a bad check? I wrote a note in the margin. Her word equal sign closure. Mine equal sign truth. By the first week of December, my life ran in ledgers. Cash drains. $28,450 documented. Florist invoice, $2,800 pinned. Hotel folio, $1,145. Park Plaza, November 19th, 21. Venue balance, $1,500 paid now 30. Courier envelope, logged November 28th. Notary gap, November 23rd wedge. Each piece was a plank. Each plank was cut to fit. Revenge wasn't rage, it was joinery. That Friday night, December 2nd, I sat in the shop with the binder open, the boy's photo clipped inside. I whispered to the empty room, "You're not my enemy." It was important to hear myself say it. Revenge rots fast if it spills on the innocent. The heater hummed. The smell of walnut lingered. My phone buzzed with Nora Sip's text. "We set Burr ready, let her file." I wrote on a fresh page, "Revenge begins in silence," then underlined it twice. Leah thought she was scripting an ending. She didn't know she was building Act 4 of my story, the act where paper, patience, and precision start carving her name into the record. I closed the binder, set it on the mantel beam I sip been shaping, and said aloud to the empty shop, "You tried to bury me with documents. Now you stall watch documents dig you out." By Sunday, December 4th, the city wore a thin crust of frost that made every step sound deliberate. It felt right. Deliberate was the only way this worked. I woke at 5:42 a.m. in the shop, poured black coffee into a paper cup, and opened the still-alive binder to the page. Nora had labeled "Court Moves." Week of December 4th. In red ink she'd written, "Expect Caldwell filing between 9 o'clock, 9:30 a.m. Be present. Do not be seen." At 7:10, Val texted a clipped update. Audio clean, video decent. 12 thirds, 4:26 p.m. Leah at St. Mary Sips Hall. Kid present. She says on tape, "Sifing, my son needs closure." Isbit, I have venue manager confirming balance paid $1,500 on November 30th. Uploading. I watched the file on my phone. Leah in a winter coat, scarf loose at the throat, the boy's mitten bopping her chin. Her voice was warm enough to thaw ice. It sounded like care. It was choreography. She was harmonizing the story where I had to stay dead for everyone to be okay. If pity was a currency, Leah was liquid. I forwarded the clip to Nora and Glass. Nora Sip's reply came first. Useful for motive and timeline. Not for court argument today. Today is threshold only. Glass followed. Correct. Do not broaden the frame. One job, prove breath. We set litigate the rest. I left the shop at 8:05, wearing a neutral coat and an old cap that shadowed my face. I parked 2 blocks from Suffolk Probate and Family Court, and walked with the slow anonymity of a man killing time. The courthouse steps held a particular cold, the kind that rises through stone into bone. Inside, the air smelled like paper and grief. 8:47 a.m. I stood in the first-floor hallway outside the clerk's window, binder in a plain tote, eyes on a laminated poster about approved forms. Glass appeared at 8:58. Trench coat, thermos, the implacable look of a man who has seen too much and files anyway. He stood at my shoulder and sipped, reading the same poster as if it had secrets. "Threshold," I said. He didn't look up. "Threshold," he said. At 9:12, a tall man in a navy suit with a gold tie clip brushed past us and into the clerk's line. Attorney Raymond Caldwell. He carried a Redwell folder puffed fat with forms and performative neatness. The clerk stamped the first page with a wet tongue that echoed slightly in the marble. 9:17 a.m. Petition for probate, estate of Michael Turner. Caldwell's pen scrawled a signature with the confidence of a man who trusts the world to nod. Glass tipped his chin toward the second window. We go now. We step to a different clerk. Filing a status affidavit on a threshold matter, Glass said. His voice had the authority of a carpenter's square, uncompromising and matter-of-fact. The clerk read the caption, looked at me, looked back at the page, and her eyebrows made a tiny, involuntary climb. She stamped 9:18 a.m. The sound rang like the note a bow makes when it finds the right string. Judge will want this upstairs, she said, sliding copies back. The elevator doors opened with a hiss like a snake, letting us pass. Outside courtroom 3, I checked the edges, ID in the right inner pocket, license expan. 2026. Trust summary tabbed, prenup addendum photocopied, Kendra's notary gap flagged but buried for later. This was not the wedge moment, this was the breath moment. In the hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass of a vending machine. Alive men look ordinary. I let the ordinariness settle on my face like a mask. We didn't go in. Not yet. When he calls the case, Glass said, we enter on the second syllable of your name. My name only has 2 syllables. Perfect, he said. At 9:31, a bailiff slid the door open a few inches and called, Estate of Michael Turner. Glass put a palm between my shoulder blades, firm, fatherly, inexorable, and steered me inside. We didn't stake seats. We stood by the rail, at counsel table. Caldwell rose, the gold tie clip winking under fluorescent truth. Your Honor, he began. This is a straightforward threshold issue, Your Honor, Glass said. Uninvited, respectful, thunder soft. Our client is alive. A sound moved through the courtroom that people make when a glass slips, and you scepter not sure if it will shatter. The judge, a woman with sharp intelligence behind tired eyes, looked over her reading glasses. I have a sworn status affidavit and a living client, Glass said. We ask the court to halt the probate matter pending verification. Approach, she said. Glass went forward. I followed. He didn't look back to check if I was there. He knew. He placed the affidavit on the bench, then turned slightly so I could step into the judge's direct line of sight. I took out my ID with steady hands and held it up, then slid it to the clerk. The judge studied me over the rim of the bench. State your name for the record. My name is Michael Turner, I said, voice even, and I am alive. The line I'd rehearsed for nights sounded simple in this room, but it was a key in a lock. Something in the judge's face softened into procedure. The court will stay all proceedings in estate of Michael Turner pending verification. Counsel for the petitioner. Mr. Caldwell, please be prepared to show cause at a status hearing on Thursday, December 15th. The court takes allegations of premature probate seriously. Caldwell Sepp's mouth opened and closed once. Your Honor, we acted on information provided. The court has heard you, she said, which is a polite way judges say that Zepput's enough. We will reconvene December 15th at 9 a.m. for status. Matter is stayed. The gavel kiss was light but final. No funeral today. In the hallway, Glass exhaled through his nose like a man whose sift watched a beam settle square. Good, he said. Now we leave. We do not gloat. We do not speak to anyone, and we do not become available for comment. What about Leah? She's still here from the docket faster than she hears from you. Let the system deliver the news. Then we outwork it. We rode down in silence. The lobby's Christmas tree blinked in benevolent ignorance. Outside, the wind had teeth again. Back at the shop by 11:12 a.m., I opened the binder and wrote in thick marker on the December 10th tab, Stay granted, probate halted, status 12/15. Under it I added, Notary wedge reserved, affidavit filed, ID confirmed. Then I texted Nora. It worked. Her reply, of course it did. Woodcut to line fits. All day, my phone buzzed with muffled fallout. A voicemail from Caldwell. I didn't set answer. A terse text from an unknown number. Leah that I wouldn't set open yet. An email from Glass. Do not respond to any contact. Preparation Phase 2. Phase 2 wasn't such joy. It was quiet and adult. That night, I drove not toward the house with the wreath in the new lock, but to a 2-family in Jamaica Plain with a maple in the yard. Nora had sent a single line earlier. Swing by 7 p.m., Ellie made stew. I parked under the maple and climbed the stairs with a heart that forgot how to be angry. Ellie, Nora's best friend since high school, opened the door with a ladle in hand, and the kind of smile I hadn't earned lately. "You look underfed," she said. Inside, her apartment smelled like time and quiet. On the bookshelf was a photo of me from 10 years ago, holding a wooden toy car I'd made for her nephew. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who save a bowl for you without asking when you'll arrive. We ate at a small table that had seen the weather of other people past storms. "We can help with the shop payroll this week," Ellie said when I hesitated over seconds. "I know you diverted funds to pad the trust last summer. Don't test martyr yourself. It sets my mess. It sets our dinner," she said, "and it sets our turn to be the net." Nora, rinsing bowls at the sink, said over her shoulder, "You don't have a secret family, Mike. You have loyalty. We stirred, just not loud about it." I looked at them, their ordinary faces, their capable hands, and felt a relief so sharp it bordered on pain. The word secret family had hovered like a charge ready to explode. But here, in a kitchen with a wobbly chair I'd promised to fix and forgot, secret meant something cleaner. Quiet grace. After dinner, Nora set a folder in front of me. December 10th hearing is locked on the docket for probate intake spillover. But after today's stay, it will be a short scheduling check. The big day is December 15th. Between now and then, we press on the notary gap, the bank drains, and Caldwell's coaching if Val confirms those voicemails exist. She tapped the table. "Also, call your foreman. Keep the business steady. Judges like breathing men who pay people on Fridays." I called Luis, my foreman, on speaker. "We keep the Seaport lobby install on schedule," I said. "If cash gets tight, Nora will float us for a week. No layoffs. Christmas is not when I trim." Luis's laugh came warm. "Good. I told the crew you were on a long quote run. They miss your swearing." We hung up. The clock over Ellie's stove ticked like a metronome, calming a room. On my way out, Nora hugged me quick and hard. Next steps, Val pulls Caldwell Sips's voicemail trail. I press the notary for disclosure. Glass drafts a bar council memo as a contingency. "You sleep." "I don't know if I can." "You can, because you did your day Sips work." She kissed my cheek. Our father always said justice is a job with splinters. I drove back through Jamaica Plain streets glistening with salt and headlights. In the truck cab, I finally opened Leah's text. It was only 3 words: "Is this you?" No punctuation, no photo, no confession. Just a woman standing at the edge of a cliff she dug herself, asking if the wind had a face. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because silence remained the only honest tool I had left that wouldn't break in my hands. Back at the shop, I wrote the night Sips ledger on a fresh page. 9:17 a.m. Caldwell files probate. 9:18 a.m. Glass files status affidavit. Judge stays matter. Deck 15 status set. Evening, dinner with Nora and Ellie. Payroll stabilized. Loyalty clarified. Ongoing? Notary wedge, bank drains, venue slave vendor confirmations, Caldwell voicemail. I closed the binder and laid it on the walnut mantel. I'd been dressing for days. The wood glowed the way honest things glow, no polish, just truth and time. I touched the edge and made a vow to the man in the mirror I barely recognized. "You will walk into court breathing, not just for yourself, but for every plank of legacy that paper tried to drown." Then I set my alarm for 6 a.m., turned off the lamp, and let the shop's quiet hold me. The city hummed its winter hymn outside, and I answered with a simple reply in my head: a carpenter's amen. We cut true. The days leading up to December 10th felt like the edge of a blade sharpened with each step Leah took toward my grave, and steadied with each breath I took preparing to stand up in court. Boston slush turned gray, salted sidewalks crunching under boots, wreaths sagging with the weight of early snow. To the neighbors, Leah was a widow wrapping up logistics before the holidays. To me, she was an architect drafting my erasure, one invoice at a time. On December 6th, Val sent me another file. Leah at St. Mary's Hall, voice low, signing the final paperwork for the memorial. Balance of $1,500. As agreed, she told the manager. Her handwriting curved across the receipt like it had somewhere to hide. The recording caught what mattered most, a whisper, as she pocketed her copy. After next week, everything stabilizes for both kids. Both kids. The boy in her arms and the one she buried on paper. I replayed it 5 times. Let it scrape against my ribs, then slid the receipt under the binder tab. Memorial closure. Every betrayal has a ledger. This was hers. That night, I sat in the workshop rehearsing. No audience, no jury, just the hum of the heater and the creak of the rafters. My name is Michael Turner, and I am alive. I repeated it until the words lost their shape, then came back to me with the force of command. Not poetry, not theater, just fact. That was the point. The truth didn't need dressing, it only needed delivery. December 7th. Nora called at dawn, her voice brisk. Glass wants us ready for cross moves. Caldwell might argue you Cetra unstable, or that your documents are forged. We counter with ledgers and payroll. I rubbed my temples. So my employees are my alibi. They always were, she said. You kept the shop alive. Now the shop keeps you alive. At noon, I visited the Seaport lobby site. Luis and the crew were setting walnut panels flush against concrete, the scent of varnish clinging to the air. Boss, Luis said, grinning. Didn't expect to see a ghost on the job site. Ghosts don't check payroll, I said, handing him Friday's checks. Each signature carried the weight of witness. Men who work with their hands don't forget who feeds them before Christmas. By December 8th, the city felt like a stage being built for a play. No one wanted to attend. Bell texted at 3:42 p.m. Marcus spotted leaving Leah Sips with overnight bag. License plate logged. He whispered to her the ascends. When he Seps officially gone, exited recorded. I didn't even open the audio. Some poison you don't sip twice. Instead, I filed it in the binder tab affair motive. Proof wasn't always for court. It was for conscience. That evening, Nora dropped by the shop with 2 thermoses of chili. She spread new spreadsheets on the bench, color-coded to within an inch of their lives. Status hearing is December 15th, she said, spoon clinking against her thermos. But Caldwell will try to milk December 10th into something more. He said I'll ask the judge to expedite transfer of assets. He said I'll say it, sense in the child settles best interest. That settles when you stand. I sep been standing all week. No, she said, pinning me with her CPA stare. You been pacing. Standing is different. Standing is final. December 9th. I barely slept. The shop cot felt like a confession booth. Around 2 a.m., I played Leah's whisper from the Ring audio again. It's okay, baby, then followed it with Caldwell's voicemail. Smooth as theft. Please have a representative contact our office. Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. The 2 voices braided into a lullaby of lies and legality. At 6:10 a.m., I stood in front of the walnut mantel I sipped been carving for weeks. I traced the grain with a finger and spoke to the empty air. Tomorrow this mantle stands straighter than me. I packed a still-alive binder into a plain leather satchel. Trust tabbed, prenup highlighted, payroll ledgers tucked behind receipts, notary gap annotated, my driver's license, edges worn, expiration 2026. I laid out my suit, navy, pressed, ordinary. Ordinary was the camouflage of truth. The night before the hearing, I wrote my final rehearsal line in the binder margin. Say name, show ID, breathe, nothing else. Then I added a note beneath it. Justice is simple when you Seb already collapsed. December 10th. Dawn cracked pale over Boston. Snowmelt dripping from gutters like clocks ticking. I left the shop at 7:32 a.m., satchel on the seat beside me. The city was waking, Duncan lines curling down sidewalks. Buses sighing into stops, commuters clutching coffee like armor. At a red light near South Station, the same place I'd nearly crumbled weeks before, I caught my reflection in the rear view. Eyes rimmed, jaw set, but breathing, always breathing. The courthouse rose from the street like a block of solemn stone. Its brass handles glinted under the gray sky. I parked 2 blocks away and walked with the calm stride of a man going to a job site. In the hallway, Glass found me at 8:54. His tie was crooked, intentionally so to look busier than he was. "Remember," he said, "you are not here to argue. You are here to exist." I nodded. Existing is my specialty. When the bailiff cracked the courtroom door, my pulse drummed in time with the creak of hinges. The announcement rang out. Estate of Michael Turner. I touched the satchel strap, felt the binder's weight, and whispered the line one last time under my breath. "My name is Michael Turner, and I am alive." Then I stepped forward, ready to turn silence into thunder. The courtroom on December 10th had the polite hush of a church where nobody believes anymore. Fluorescence hummed. The seal over the bench stared down like a coin you can't afford to flip. I stood just inside the rail with Glass at my shoulder and the still-alive satchel heavy against my thigh. I could smell old paper and winter wool. Truth is a smell too, clean, faint, like cold iron. The bailiff cracked the door and let the morning spill in, a few attorneys with Redwell folders, a pair of sad-eyed cousins clutching a will, a woman in a navy peacoat whispering to a toddler whose mitten was clipped to his sleeve with a plastic bear. My breath hitched. The boy's mitten was red. Leah had brought him to court. She slid into the second row on the petitioner's side, chin lifted like a nurse charting vitals. The boy pressed to her hip. She scanned the room with the alertness of someone who's come to confirm a story she wrote. Her eyes moved past me without recognition. Grief had given her permission not to notice. At counsel table, Attorney Caldwell stood and arranged his pages as if neat corners could make the thing true. His gold tie clip winked. When the clerk called, "Estate of Michael Turner," he rose with easy authority. "Good morning, Your Honor," he began, smooth as a lithium drip. "Raymond Caldwell for the petitioner, Leah Turner. This is a straightforward intestate matter. Dissident passed in November, survived by spouse. Petition for appointment has been—" "Threshold issue, Your Honor," Glass said. Not loud, but exactly right, a saw finding its kerf. "Our client is alive." The room answered with a ripple. The sound people make when the floor tilts 5 degrees. The judge, a woman with a practiced skepticism and tired kindness, looked up over the rims of her readers. "Counsel, identify your client." Glass shifted half a step so I could be seen without spectacle. "Michael Turner, Your Honor." He lifted the status affidavit like a carpenter holds a square, unapologetically precise. "Executed this morning. Government ID ready." The Judge Essett's gaze met mine. It was not soft. It was measuring. "State your name for the record." "My name is Michael Turner," I said, steady, "and I am alive." Behind me, a chair leg scraped. Leah's hand flew to her mouth. The boy, her boy, twisted to look. He had the assessing eyes of toddlers who believe everything is solvable by standing closer. His small fingers tightened in the red mitten strap, and he blinked at me like I was a trick of light. The judge nodded to the clerk. "Take his ID." I slid my license, expiration 2026, across the rail. The clerk checked the photo, checked me, checked the affidavit, checked again. Procedure is just doubt in uniform. "Counsel," the judge said to Caldwell, "you filed a petition for probate at 9:17 a.m. asserting death. On what evidence?" Caldwell found his professional sorrow. "Your Honor, we relied on information from the spouse and supporting documents." He tapped his folder, including an affidavit notarized on November 23rd and correspondence with vendors regarding the memorial on December 12th. "Your Honor," Glass said, "we've tendered a status affidavit and a living client. The court should stay the matter, direct the petitioner to preserve assets, and set a status hearing on December 15th. We also note, without arguing it today, that the notary journal for November 23rd appears to have a gap precisely where petitioner's affidavit would land. Again, we are not asking you to decide that today. We simply ask that nothing further move on a foundation this unstable." Leah stood up as if her body had been wound and released. Your Honor," her voice went shiny with panic. "I did it for my son." The judge's attention shifted to her like a stage light. "Madame, sit for now. You will speak through counsel." "I don't have a counsel." He is my counsel, she said, pointing at Caldwell, who carefully didn't look back at her. Then you will let him speak, the judge said, and turned to the clerk. Mark the status affidavit and ID as Exhibit A. The court stays all proceedings in a state of Michael Turner. Parties to return Thursday, December 15th, 9 a.m. on the status calendar. Petitioner is ordered to preserve all assets and cease memorial expenditures beyond non-refundable deposits. Court will issue a written order this afternoon. The gavel touched wood like a seal pressed into wax. No drama, just an impression you can't scrape off. But Glass wasn't finished shaping the moment. Your Honor, 2 additional housekeeping items. First, we request an interim order barring account withdrawals from joint accounts absent dual signatures. We have evidence of $28,450 in cash drains. Nov 2/8/15. Second, we request that any communications by Attorney Caldwell to third parties regarding the supposed death be preserved for potential review. Caldwell put a hand on the table as if to feel that it was still there. Your Honor, this is theatrical. The court should not indulge. The court indulges evidence. The judge said, Miss Turner, do you object to preserving communications and refraining from withdrawals? Leah Sepp's mouth opened, then closed. I can sift access any more funds anyway, she said, eyes skating to Caldwell then away. Not without him. Excellent, the judge said, which meant merely noted. She looked at me again, not unkindly. Mr. Turner, you will make yourself available in person on December 15th, with identification. I will, I said. Good. We're done for today. The formalities moved like a well-oiled hinge. Files closed, pens capped. People gathered their small devastations and stood. I felt my knees consider buckling and told them no. Leah didn't move. The boy wriggled free and toddled into the aisle, drawn by the gravity of my body knowing his name without ever having heard it. He planted himself 3 feet from me and examined my boots with professional seriousness, as if determining whether they could be trusted to carry a man who won't stay buried. Leah reached for him too late. Mason, she whispered, the name shivering into the quiet. There it was, at last, the truth without choreography. I crouched because towering over a child is cowardice. Up close he smelled like winter wool and milk. Hi, I said softly. So softly it might not even count. Big day, huh? He looked up with huge, effortful dignity and nodded as if he'd decided to pretend we were discussing the weather. Miss Turner, Glass said, voice lowered but edged, please take your child. He didn't say you did this. He didn't need to. Leah scooped Mason up and backed away, eyes on me like a diver judging the distance to the surface. I was trying to make us safe, she said, the words falling apart as they came. The debt, the daycare, the house. She choked on the last word. Houses choke people. I know. The court has ordered us all to stop, Glass said. Do that. Caldwell cleared his throat with expensive restraint. Miss Turner, we should step outside. Leah clutched the boy tighter. Is it really you? She asked me, not moving. It would have been easy to answer with a blade. Easy to say, I'm the man you buried. Rage offers such gorgeous lines. But I was standing in the one room where words become architecture. I chose beams, not knives. It seps me, I said, and I said I'll be here on December 15th. She flinched as if a date could slap. We left without looking back. The hallway felt wider on exit, like rooms do when you've told the truth inside them. Downstairs, the Christmas tree blinked at nobody in particular. On the courthouse steps, Glass finally let out a breath through his nose, the closest he comes to a grin. Perfect, he said. Perfect? I asked, stunned by the size of the quiet in my chest. She brought Mason, he said. Your Honor, motive. Your Honor, urgency. Your Honor, why falsehood ran faster than courage. Not today, Seps's argument. But judges remember the feel of a case. They now know its temperature. We moved to the sidewalk, where city buses exhaled and a delivery truck rattled past, and the world declined to applaud. Glass stopped, tilted his head. One more thing. On December 15th, we bring Exhibit B, the trust and prenup addendum, to get them in the record. We leave the notary gap for when Caldwell tries a dignity play. You cannot let him be more sorrowful than your facts. Understood? Understood. He squeezed my shoulder once approval a man like him rations. Go back to the shop. Pay someone for something ordinary. Judges like breathing men who keep the world turning. I walked the 2 blocks to my truck. On the way, my phone buzzed a notification from Mr. Whitcomb, a photo of my mailbox with a USPS slip for a missed certified letter, timestamp 10:14 a.m. He wrote, "Left while you were at court, will hold." The universe has a terrible sense of humor when it's being helpful. In the cab, I opened the still alive binder to the tab labeled Court, December, and wrote, 9:17 a.m. Caldwell files. 9:18 a.m. We file status. Judge stays probate. Deck 15 set. Leah present with Mason says, I did it for my son. Interim orders. Preserve assets. Refrain from withdrawals. Preserve communications. Next prep exhibit Bray. Trust plus prenup. Notary gap held in reserve. Caldwell contact preservation bar council memo draft. My hands shook for the first time that day. Honest and unashamed, shaking, is what wood does when the load shifts before settling. I let it pass. Then I drove to the seaport job and signed for a pallet of fasteners like a man who has always signed for pallets of fasteners. Back at the shop, as evening gathered blue on the windows, I laid the binder on the walnut mantel I'd been carving since Rage learned to hold a chisel. I ran my hand along the grain and spoke the day's aphorism to the empty room. You can't fake a heartbeat. Paper tried. Breath corrected it. Leah had brought her secret child into the house of law, and the court had answered with the only lullaby that matters, pause. In 2 days she would try to sing again at St. Mary's with lilies and chairs, and a portrait of a man who wouldn't sit still in his own frame. But for now the gavel had rewritten the week. I closed the binder. My father's old echo, the 1987 gavel that stole our house, softened into something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just alignment. The beam had seated. The frame would hold. The morning after the courtroom shock, December 11th, Boston wore a thin crust of snow, brittle underfoot. The headlines didn't mention me, but the silence in my phone did. Leah hadn't texted again. Caldwell hadn't called. That kind of silence is never mercy. It's strategy. I poured coffee at the shop. Binder open on the bench, and replayed the scene in my head. Her blurting, I did it for my son. Mason's mittened hand in hers, the way she flinched when I spoke my name. Those moments would hang in the judge's memory like smoke that clings long after the fire's out. By noon, Val sent me a new file. Listen to this. The audio was grainy but clear enough. Caldwell's voicemail to Leah, dated December 3rd. His voice was smooth with practiced condolence. Leah, remember to keep your answers simple. The court doesn't need every detail, just your certainty. Don't over-explain. I forwarded it to Glass. He responded within 5 minutes. Preserve. This is bar council material. Do not leak. We sell. Introduce carefully. Every recording was a nail, and Caldwell was building his own coffin with them. That evening, I parked 2 streets over from home and watched from the cab. Through the front window, Leah was bent over papers at the table, Mason asleep in his car seat beside her. She looked smaller than in court, shoulders caved, hair loose, pen tapping against the table like she wanted it to tell her what to write. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity without accountability is just fuel for repeat fires. December 12th, the Memorial Day. At 10:15 a.m., a florist truck unloaded crates of lilies at St. Mary Sips Hall. Val texted photos, rows of white chairs, programs stacked, a portrait of me propped on an easel like a bad joke. The caption read, Shea Sips going ahead. Anyway, guests expected at 2 p.m. I stayed at the shop. I didn't storm the hall. The gavel had already frozen probate. I didn't need to upstage her performance. Instead, I wrote in the binder, funeral canceled by paper, not by me. Later, Val called. Half the guests were whispering when she couldn't produce a death certificate. Some left before it began. The priest refused to preside. She sat alone with the kid, candles guttering. Closure doesn't set like lies. I closed my eyes. That was punishment enough. On December 13th, Glass filed a motion for accounting to compel Leah to disclose every withdrawal, every vendor payment, every debt. Nora helped him build the exhibits, each receipt tabbed like vertebrae. Accounting is justice with decimals, Nora told me. She said'll hate it because it's sellers, but slow justice doesn't settle crack, it holds. That same day, Glass sent Caldwell's voicemail to bar counsel under seal. The words "don't over-explain" had a sour smell in legal circles. Attorneys can advise, but coaching grief into fraud leaves fingerprints. By December 14th, Leah finally broke the silence. She called, voice hoarse. "I wasn't set trying to erase you, Mike," she said. "I was trying to make us safe, Mason Sepp's daycare. The bills, your pension was the only rope I could grab. You tried to pull me under with it," I said quietly. "I didn't think you stopped." She stopped herself. "I didn't stand to think you stopped. Come back." "You didn't lose me, Leah," I said. "You gave me away." She wept softly, then hung up. I didn't call back. Some dialogues only the court can finish. The December 15th hearing loomed. I laid out the binder on the mantelbeam, each tab alive with proof. Trust, July 14th, 2022. Prenup Addendum, May 12, 2016. Bank drains, $28,450. Florist invoice. Venue balance, $1,500. Hotel folio, $1,145. Notary Gap, November 23rd. Caldwell voicemail coaching. Every piece felt less like revenge now and more like preservation. I wasn't building a case against Leah. I was rebuilding the frame my father lost in 1987. That night, Nora came by with Chinese takeout. She sat across from me on the shop stool, carton in hand, eyes steady. "You know what tomorrow is, right?" she asked. "Judgment." "No," she said. "Correction. Judgment punishes. Correction restores." Dad would have called it that. You stir not just winning a case, you stir correcting the ledger. I nodded, chopsticks hovering. "And Leah? She has to face consequences." "But the boy," she paused. "He deserves to grow up knowing at least one adult fought to make the truth public." I set the food down. "Then that sips the story we still leave behind." December 15th waited like a loaded hammer. But I wasn't collapsing this time. My collapse had already hardened into resolve. Now I had exhibits, affidavits, and a name that carried weight again. The fallout was messy. The consequences were sharp. But the gavel was near, and for the first time since November 18th, I felt ready to let it fall on my side. The courthouse on December 15th smelled like wet wool and toner, winter and bureaucracy braided tight. I arrived at 8:41 a.m. Satchel on my shoulder, the still-alive binder heavy with tabs that felt like ribs. Glass joined at 8:55. Tie straight this time, as if the day demanded symmetry. We didn't talk. Justice likes clean lungs. Inside courtroom 3, the air hummed with fluorescent indifference. Caldwell took his place at counsel table, face paler than last week. The gold tie clip demoted to merely functional. Leah slipped into the second row, hair pinned back, Mason at daycare by the look of her empty hands. She kept her gaze down, thumb worrying the edge of a folded paper program that must have survived December 12th. A memorial no priest would bless. The clerk called, "Status in estate of Michael Turner." We rose. The judge peered over her glasses with the steady patience of a person who has already made up her mind but will let you catch up. "Appearances?" she asked. "Michael Turner. Present with counsel." "Addie." "Glass," my lawyer said. "Petitioner Leah Turner, with counsel Addie." Caldwell replied, voice pitched to contrition. "Good," the judge said, marking something on the file. "We are on for status." The court stayed proceedings on December 10th upon credible representation that the decedent is alive, supported by affidavit and identification. I have reviewed the submissions since then. She placed a flat palm on the stack like a carpenter testing a board. "Let's proceed." Glass moved first. Your Honor, we ask the court to withdraw the petition with prejudice, to order a full accounting, and to recognize and uphold the Turner Family Trust, executed July 14, 22, along with the prenup addendum December 16, 05, waiving spousal elective share as to the primary residence. Additionally, we request interim orders for repayment of wrongful withdrawals totaling $28,450 and preservation of all communications, including those by Attorney Caldwell to third parties, pending potential bar counsel review. Caldwell rose, hands half open in the universal sign for "Be gentle." Your Honor, there was no willful misrepresentation. Miss Turner acted in good faith during a medical uncertainty about her husband's cystis. The judge lifted a finger. Counsel, Miss Turner's November 23 affidavit, purportedly notarized, asserted death. The court finds it curious that the notary journal supplied by Kendra, last name redacted, contains a gap in entries precisely where that affidavit should appear. Curious is a polite word, she added. Dry as paper. Do you wish to be heard on the journal irregularity? Caldwell cleared his throat. Clerical error, Your Honor. Sloppy notary practices shouldn't be visited upon the petitioner. Glass didn't flinch. Sloppiness doesn't explain silence in the journal, Your Honor, nor the timing. Wed November 23rd, nor the rush demonstrated by a Lock Reiki invoice on November 17th and memorial invoices, including $2,800 florals and a $1,500 venue balance. Turner on December 3rd, in which he advises her to keep your answers simple. Don't over-explain. We are not asking you to decide an ethical issue today. We simply ask you to protect the record this court's integrity deserves. A muscle in Caldwell's jaw ticked. Leah squeezed the folded program until its paper spines squealed. The judge inhaled, then spoke the way carpenters drive a final nail, straight, committed. Here is the court's ruling. The petition for probate in estate of Michael Turner is withdrawn with prejudice. The decedent is alive. Full stop. The court orders a complete accounting by Miss Turner within 30 days of today. All withdrawals, cash movements, and vendor payments since November 1st, including but not limited to $28,450 in cash withdrawals, $2,800 florist, $1,145 hotel, $1,500 venue. The court recognizes the Turner Family Trust July 14, 22 and the prenup addendum December 16, 05. The primary residence remains separate property per those instruments. Miss Turner is enjoined from encumbering or entering into any transactions concerning that property. The court refers the notary journal irregularity to the Secretary of the Commonwealth for review and instructs counsel to preserve all relevant communications. Miss Turner is directed to preserve devices and accounts relevant to communications with Dr. Marcus Hale and Attorney Caldwell from November 1st onward. Regarding the minor child, Mason parties stipulated in chambers that Dr. Hale is the biological father. The court directs Dr. Hale, though not a party to this probate matter, to initiate appropriate paternity/co-parenting filings in the family and juvenile court within 14 days. This court will transmit an advisory regarding today's findings. Each point landed with the soft inexorability of snow. Quiet, transformative, not to be argued with. The room breathed out, and then realizing there was more, held its breath again. Glass inclined his head barely. His version of a bow. Thank you, Your Honor. Leah Sepp's voice broke the hush. Your Honor, I was drowning. She looked at me then, finally, not through me. The debt, the daycare, the nights watching him sleep. I thought if I could just get the pension, the house, just for a while. The court sympathizes with financial strain, the judge said, not unkindly. The court does not indulge fraud disguised as grief. Leah's shoulders collapsed an inch. A person can measure their life in inches like that. Caldwell tried one last angle. Your Honor, any order for repayment should account for non-refundable vendor costs and emotional distress incurred. Counsel, the judge said, tone flat as marble. Miss Turner bears the burden of her choices, not the other way around. Repayment will be dollar for any funds spent without legal authority that can be recovered. Non-refundable vendor expenditures will be evaluated on submission with receipts. Emotional distress is not before this court today. She shuffled papers, then looked at me the way a foreman checks the last joint. Mr. Turner, anything further from you? I thought of 1987. The gavel that took our father's house because a boy and a girl didn't know what a will could do. I thought of my workshop, the walnut mantle whose grain ran straight through the lies. I thought of the boy whose mitten was red. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Only this I want the record to reflect, that Mason is not at fault. Children are not tools. The adults will sort the money and the paper. The child deserves a future with the truth. The judge's mouth softened, barely. So reflected, she tapped her pen once, then set it down. We are adjourned. The gavel's kiss was quiet, but the world shifted on its axis. In the corridor, the Christmas tree blinked like a metronome marking new time. Glass scribbled a date on a post-it, accounting due January 14th, and handed it to me. Now we do the boring work, he said. Boring saves houses. Do we file the bar memo now? I asked. We already did, under seal, he said. The board will do what boards do, slow, careful, thorough. If they reprimand him, it will be because the facts were sturdier than his posture. Leah stood near the elevators, clutching the folded program like a life raft that had learned it couldn't float. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then she came close enough for human voices to carry without echo. I told Marcus I'd handle it, she said. Not quite to me, not quite to herself. And when I couldn't set, I tried to get the court to do it for me. I'm sorry, she swallowed, for the house, for your name. You didn't lose me. I said, the line truer now than when I set it practiced it. You gave me away. Tears hit the program, blooming in little starbursts. She nodded, a fragile hinge holding. Estelle, repay what I can, she whispered. Estelle, sign what I have to sign. You sell account, I said, not cruel. Then you sell parent with Marcus, and you stop using paper to manage pain. She nodded again. The elevator chimed. She stepped in, turned once, and mouthed, thank you. And I didn't know whether she meant for the truth or for the restraint. Maybe both. Glass and I walked out into a city that looked the same but wasn't. Snow feathered down, softening edges that had been knives a month ago. I drove to the seaport site and signed off on a shipment of fasteners, the pallet plastic crackling under my glove. Luis saw the set of my shoulders and raised his chin in a question. It held, I said. What did? The frame. Back at the shop, I opened the binder to the last tab, Justice, and wrote, in thick Carpenter Sepp's letters, December 15th. Petition withdrawn with prejudice. Accounting ordered. Trust plus prenup upheld. House protected. Caldwell referred Marcus to co-parent. Below it, I added the line I wanted Mason to read one day when he asks what happened to the winter when people confused paper with truth. We didn't win a fight. We corrected a ledger. I slid the binder onto the walnut mantle, ran my hand along the grain, and let the new quiet settle, not silence. Alignment. By December 20th, the snow in Boston had turned to dirty slush, the kind that hides ice beneath and makes every step a gamble. I didn't mind. The footing under me was clearer than it had been in decades. The petition was dead, the house was safe, and my name had been spoken into the record not as an obituary, but as a presence. I walked through the shop at dawn, turning on lights one by one. The place smelled like sawdust and coffee, my truest perfumes. On the workbench sat the still-alive binder, edges swollen from weeks of being opened, tapped, and tested. I slid it back into its cabinet, labeled the drawer Trust and Legacy. For the first time, the binder felt less like a weapon, and more like a record book, a ledger that proved breathing leaves evidence. That afternoon, I taped a checklist to the inside of my front door. Locks changed again. Payroll met. Trust binder returned to the cabinet. December 15th, order filed and stamped. I wanted the list there to remind me every time I left or came home. Stability is maintenance, not drama. My father never got the chance to tape a list like that after 1987. The state had taken the house before he could steady the frame. This time the gavel had guarded it. Leah sent a photo 2 days later. It was of Mason, bundled in a green coat, cheeks pink with cold. No caption, just the boy's face staring at the camera, like he already knew paper could lie. I typed, deleted, then finally wrote, "Be well." That was all. Some stories need only a period, not a paragraph. Work kept me honest. The seaport lobby was finished by Christmas week, walnut panels gleaming under recessed lights, every joint flush. I walked the site with Luis on December 19th, running my hand over the wood. "You sir smiling," he said. "Wood doesn't that's lie," I told him. "That sip's enough." On the drive back, I passed St. Mary's Hall, the place Leah had tried to stage my funeral. The lilies were gone. The windows dark, a banner for a holiday concert flapping in the wind. I didn't stop. The building had already been repurposed. So had I. That night, I sat in the shop with a blank sheet of paper and began sketching a new design, a walnut mantle, wider than the one I'd started in November. This one would have inlays, small dovetails, precise and patient, not to sell, not to give away, to keep. A reminder that strength is in the joints, not the surface. As the chisel traced lines, I thought about the words I'd spoken in court. "My name is Michael Turner, and I am alive." Simple, necessary. More than a declaration, it was a philosophy, existence as evidence. On December 20th, I recorded one last voice memo into my phone. "Still alive. Final entry. Court order secured. Trust upheld. House safe. Payroll steady. Leah accountable. Caldwell referred. Mason preserved. I am here." Then, after a pause, I added, "You can set fake a heartbeat." I saved it, labeled it Ledger December 20th, 25. Reflection doesn't mean erasure. I didn't forgive Leah that week. Forgiveness is carpentry. It takes longer than most people think. But I did see the outline of a future where anger wasn't the only material I worked with. Mason deserved that, maybe even Leah in her own way. I looked around the shop, racks of chisels, clamps lined in soldier rows, piles of walnut and oak. My father Sip's tools still sat on the top shelf, handles worn smooth by hands that never got to fight in court. I whispered to the empty rafters, "We held the house, Dad. This time we held it." On my way out that evening, I locked the door, checked the checklist on the wall, and smiled. The list was complete. The frame was true. As I turned off the light, I left one sentence written across the chalkboard by the exit. Words for myself, for Nora, for Mason someday. When he seps old enough to ask what really happened that winter. "You didn't Ned lose me. You gave me away." By the first week of January, Boston began its slow thaw. Ice retreated in patches, gutters ran like tired veins, and sidewalks wore the salt stains of a long fight. I wasn't waiting for headlines. Justice doesn't make them. It files slowly in clerks' offices and bank ledgers. On January 3rd, I received confirmation. Leah had repaid $6,200 from the florist and venue vendors. Not everything, non-refundable deposits still clung like burrs, but it was the beginning of her accounting. Nora called it dollars crawling back to daylight. Caldwell, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. Bar Council issued an interim report on January 6th. Council admonished for failure to maintain professional independence. It wasn't disbarment, not yet, but it was a reprimand that would shadow every signature he made from then on. Men like him survive on reputation. A crack in the glass never vanishes. Leah filed her accounting on January 10th. $28,450 in cash withdrawals listed line by line. $280 florist invoice attached. $1,145 hotel folio. $1.50 venue payment. The columns bled red. She had no choice but to show the numbers. The court order forced her hand. Seeing my own life itemized like stolen lumber made me clench my jaw, but Nora reminded me ledgers don't sit, lie. People do. At the shop, life steadied. Payroll went out every Friday. Luis and the crew ribbed me for showing up in person again, saying ghosts don't cut panels square. I laughed with them. Honest this time. Work is its own reprieve. One Saturday, Nora and I took her niece Theo to the Science Museum. The Foucault pendulum swung in its slow, certain arc, knocking down pegs one by one. Theo gasped, every time a peg fell, convinced she was watching magic. I leaned on the rail and whispered, "It's not magic, kid. It's proof the world keeps turning." The pendulum calmed something in me, the reminder that truth swings steady no matter how many lies line up like pegs. Leah and I exchanged no more calls. Her texts were only about Mason daycare hours, medical checkups, one photo of him holding a toy hammer. I answered with short replies, neutral and respectful. The boy was not a ledger entry. He was a life. I wanted him to know someday that at least one adult chose to stand still in the truth. On January 20th, I renamed the binder. It no longer lived under "Still Alive." I wrote a new label in block letters. "Still here, survival is temporary. Presence is permanent." That evening I sat in the shop with the walnut mantle finished at last, joints tight, grain glowing. I set the binder on top of it, not as evidence, but as memory. A carpenter's archive. Aftermath isn't dramatic, it's small. It's Leah signing repayment checks in silence. It's Caldwell sitting through ethics lectures with younger lawyers eyeing him sideways. It's me making payroll, fixing clamps, eating stew at Nora's table. It's Theo tugging my sleeve at the pendulum and saying, "Uncle Mike, it's going to swing forever, right?" I looked down at her and said, "That seps the point, kid." By the end of January, the snow had melted off the shop roof. The city was still Boston, loud, busy, impatient. But my frame held. For the first time since November, I locked the shop door at night and believed the quiet wasn't waiting to betray me. March came in thin and bright, the kind of cold that doesn't bite, just reminds you to move. Boston thawed at the edges. I was ripping down a walnut plank in the shop when the mail slot clacked, and something stiff skated across the floor like a puck. It stopped against my boot. A postcard. Glossy, white lilies, the kind that smell like a sermon. Across the front in elegant script. "Thank you for choosing Whitestone Memorial Services." Addressed to Estate of Michael Turner. I stood there with the saw still humming behind me, teeth singing an idle note. The card gleamed like it had not heard about December 10th or December 15th, or the way the gavel can change a season. Paper travels slower than truth, but it always arrives. I shut off the saw. The quiet slid over the room like a sheet. On the back there was a survey box. "Was your service satisfactory? Options excellent. Good fare for poor." I almost laughed. Then I didn't. Instead, I took the postcard to the bench, wiped a smear of walnut dust off the corner, and held it under the lamp. It was addressed in a careful font that pretends it knows you. It didn't. But it knew something about us anyway, that people make stories and paper keeps trying to believe them. I thought of Leah sitting alone at St. Mary's Hall on December 12th, candles guttering, the priest refusing to stand. I thought of Mason's red mitten, of Nora's spreadsheets of glass saying threshold like a man saying door. The card in my hand felt like the world's neatest typo. I pinned it to the corkboard and stepped back. It looked lonely there, too flippant for what it represented. So I took it down again, sanded the last face of the walnut mantle, and set the postcard inside a simple frame I'd milled months ago for nothing in particular. Maybe it had always been waiting. I hung the frame above the bench at eye level. The lilies stared back, polite and wrong. Below them I chalked a date line on the wall. November 18th, bouquet at the door. Missou. Dequin. Stayed. December 12th, a funeral without a dead man. Key 15 ledger corrected. March, postcard arrives. A carpenter. Set us calendar. Not pretty, but honest. Work stayed simple. Luis and the crew started a new back bay job, floating shelves over plaster that wanted to crumble if you stared too hard. We coaxed it into holding. Some walls just need more patience and the right anchors. After lunch, I would catch myself glancing at the postcard and feeling a weight lighten that I didn't know I was still carrying. Irony properly placed is a brace. Nora came by the shop the first Friday of March, with donuts and a victory grin that accountants rarely risk. "Leah completed month 2 repayment," she said, powder sugar blooming on a ledger line. "Slow but steady. Caldwell? Assigned ethics monitoring for 6 months. He hates it." She waved at the lilies. "New decor?" "Final exhibit," I said. She read the caption aloud. Thank you for choosing Whitestone, estate of Michael Turner. Her mouth bent into something between a wince and a smile. You framing this as either petty or perfect. Maybe both, I said. Mostly it sets true. Nora sipped her coffee. Dad would Sif liked this ending. Because the house held? Because you built the ending out of proof, not noise. We stood there a while, two survivors of 1987 staring at a piece of mail that had arrived late to a party. It didn't understand. That Sunday, Ellie hosted dinner. Theo brought a science kit and made a baking soda volcano that erupted pink foam across the table. Everyone cheered like it was the first volcano in history. When the fizz settled, Theo asked if I'd build her a shelf just for trophies. I don't have yet, I promised I would. Some frames you install before the weight shows up. On my way home, I drove past St. Mary's cell. The hall lights were warm, laughter leaking from a birthday party inside. It had reclaimed itself, and so had I. It struck me then that the opposite of a funeral isn't a birth. It's continuance. Back at the shop, I recorded one last memo. Not for the Still Here binder, but for the space above the postcard where my eye lands when I lock up. March. Irony delivered by USPS. The estate thanks a service that never was. The living man frames it. Lesson noted. Paper will try to finish your story for you. Don't sit hand at the pen. I set the phone down and listened to the building breathe. The wooden kind of breathing that new houses do in winter, timbers settling into trust. I looked up at the lilies, at the line of dates in chalk, at the walnut mantle glowing with the soft authority of something cut true. I spoke the final line out loud, so the walls could keep it for me. We didn't yet win a fight. We corrected a ledger. You can fake a heartbeat. I switched off the lights. The postcard kept its pale glow in the after dark, a small, ridiculous star over a shop that had learned to outlive paper. Then I locked the door and walked into March, carrying nothing I couldn't lift.